I drove 3 hours to Maple Hollow believing this Thanksgiving might finally be calm. But when I stepped into the dining room, the silence was louder than any argument. There were 6 perfectly set places at the table and 7 people in the room. My mother smiled, her face lit by a ring light she thought I wouldn't notice, and delivered the punchline she had been practicing all morning. No seat for disappointments. Hannah. The drive to Maple Hollow always felt like traveling backward in time, and not in the sentimental, sepia-toned way Christmas movies like to promise. It was a physical regression. With every mile marker that flashed past on the interstate, I felt the hard-won armor of my adult life stripping away, plate by plate. By the time I took the exit for the county road, the 33-year-old project manager who managed million-dollar budgets and navigated complex stakeholder negotiations had evaporated. In her place sat Hannah the daughter, a nervous creature composed entirely of apology and hope. I had told myself this year would be different. I had repeated it like a mantra against the steering wheel for the last 40 miles. This year will be calmer. We are all adults. The bad years are over. In the passenger seat sat a ceramic baking dish wrapped in 2 layers of tea towels to keep the heat in. It was a sweet potato gratin, made from scratch, with the pecans hand-toasted exactly the way my mother claimed she liked them, even though she usually scraped them off. It was a peace offering. It was a bribe. It was proof that I was functional, capable, and contributing. My phone sat in the cup holder, silent. The months leading up to this Thanksgiving had been defined by a polite, chilly distance. My texts to the family group chat were answered with thumbs-up reactions or hours of silence. When I called my mother, she was always just stepping out or just sitting down to eat. I had interpreted the silence as peace. I thought perhaps we had finally reached a détente where we could simply exist in separate lanes without crashing. I turned onto the long, winding driveway that led to the house. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long, bruised shadows across the lawn. The house itself was a sprawling, pristine 2-story colonial that my parents had bought 5 years ago, right after my father's consulting firm had allegedly had its best year on record. It was a beautiful house, the kind that appeared in catalogs for high-end patio furniture, but it always felt like a stage set to me. As I put the car in park, I checked my reflection in the visor mirror. I looked tired, but steady. I had worn a blazer over my sweater, a subconscious attempt to look professional, to look like someone who could not be easily dismissed. I took a breath, grabbed the warm ceramic dish, and walked to the front door. The first thing I noticed when I stepped inside was the lighting. It was aggressive. The foyer usually relied on the soft, yellow glow of the overhead chandelier. But today there were 2 portable ring lights set up on stands, angled toward the entrance. A tripod stood near the coat rack, a phone clamped into its jaw, the camera lens staring like a dark, unblinking eye. My mother appeared from the kitchen before I could even take my coat off. She was wearing a cashmere sweater in a shade of cream that looked expensive and dangerous to stain. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, stiff with hairspray, and her smile was so bright it looked painful. "You made it!" she exclaimed. Her voice pitched an octave higher than her normal speaking register. She didn't hug me. Instead, she gestured vaguely toward the living room. "You are early. We were just finishing the final touches." "I am only 10 minutes early," I said, shifting the heavy dish in my hands. "I brought the sweet potatoes." "Wonderful," she said, but she didn't reach for them. "Just put them in the kitchen, on the island. Don't clutter the counters near the stove." I walked into the kitchen. My Aunt Linda was there, aggressively mashing potatoes in a large pot. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine for a fraction of a second before darting away. "Hi, Aunt Linda," I said. "Hey, Hannah," she muttered, turning her back to me to add butter to the pot. "Keep it down, okay? Your dad is recording something in the den." The house felt frantic, but not with the warm chaos of holiday cooking. It felt like the backstage of a theater production 5 minutes before the curtain went up. There was a vibrating tension in the air, a frequency that made my teeth ache. I set my dish down on the corner of the island and walked toward the dining room to see if I could help set the table. That was when I froze. The dining room table was a masterpiece of Thanksgiving aesthetics. A gold runner stretched down the center, flanked by autumn gourds and flickering LED candles. The good china, the set we were never allowed to touch growing up, was laid out at every seat. I counted the chairs: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I counted the people in the house: my parents, my brother Justin, Aunt Linda, my cousin Mike, Mike's fiancée, Sarah, and me. 7 people, 6 chairs. I blinked, assuming I had miscounted. I circled the table. At the head sat my father's chair. Opposite him, my mother's. On one side, 2 settings. On the other side, 2 settings. Each plate had a calligraphy name card resting on the folded linen napkin. Dad, Mom, Justin, Linda, Mike, Sarah. There was a gap on the side with the windows. A conspicuous, empty space where a 7th chair should have been. The floorboards were bare. There was no placemat, no fork, no glass, just the smooth, polished wood of the table edge. I felt a cold prickle of confusion start at the base of my neck. I turned around, thinking perhaps the chair was in the corner, that maybe I was supposed to bring it to the table myself. Then I heard the laughter. My father walked in from the living room, holding a glass of scotch. He looked distinctively presidential, his silver hair swept back, his sweater vest straining slightly against his midsection. My mother followed him, that rehearsed smile still plastered on her face. Justin trailed behind them, looking at the floor, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "I see you noticed," my mother said. Her voice was light, airy, as if she were commenting on the weather. I looked at her, then back at the empty space at the table. "I don't understand," I said. "Where is my seat?" My father took a slow sip of his drink. He chuckled, a rich baritone sound that used to make me feel safe when I was a child and now made my stomach turn. He gestured to the empty space with his glass. "It is a new tradition, Hannah. We decided to make some changes this year." My mother stepped forward, linking her arm through my father's. She looked directly at me, her eyes gleaming with a strange, frantic excitement. She delivered the line as if she had been rehearsing it in the mirror for weeks. "No seat for disappointments." "Hannah," she said. The silence that followed was absolute. It sucked the air out of the room. I felt my face go hot, then cold. I looked at Justin. He was my older brother, the successful architect, the one who always claimed to be neutral, the one who told me I was too sensitive. He was studying the crown molding with intense fascination, refusing to meet my gaze. I looked at Aunt Linda in the kitchen doorway. She was wiping her hands on a dish towel. Looking down, Cousin Mike and Sarah were standing near the buffet, and Mike whispered something to Sarah. I caught the tail end of it. "Told you she needed humility." The words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't a mistake. This was coordinated. They had discussed this. They had planned this. They had likely typed it out in the family group chat, the one I wasn't a part of, and agreed that this would be the year they taught Hannah a lesson. I forced my voice to remain steady, calling on every ounce of professional training I had. I dug my fingernails into my palms so hard I felt the skin break. "Is this a joke?" I asked. "Because I drove 3 hours to be here." My father shrugged. A casual, dismissive motion. "We needed an extra seat for the camera equipment," he said, contradicting the slogan my mother had just delivered. "And frankly, Hannah, after the year you have had, we thought a little standing room might be good for your character." The year I had had. He was referring to the burnout, the 3 months I had spent unemployed after leaving a toxic firm, the 3 months where I had needed to sleep on their couch for 2 weeks before finding a new apartment. I had paid them rent. I had bought my own groceries. I had rebuilt my life, landed a better job, and restored my savings. But to them, I was still the broken thing that had cluttered their guest room. "It is in the garage," my father added, almost as an afterthought. "The chair. It is in the garage. If you have earned it, you can go get it." My mother giggled. It was a terrible, girlish sound. "Oh, don't look so tragic. Hannah, it is just a bit of fun, a motivation. We are trying to help you toughen up. I looked at the tripod in the hallway. The red light was on. They were filming, or they were about to film. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I thought I might be sick right there on the Persian rug. The cruelty of it was breathtaking, but the spectacle of it was worse. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to cry, or scream, or stomp my foot so they could point at me and say, "See? Look how unstable she is. Look how much she needs us to manage her." I refused to give them the footage. "I need some air," I said. My voice sounded flat, robotic. I turned on my heel and walked back toward the front door. "Oh, Hannah, don't be dramatic," my mother called out after me. "Come back. We are about to pour the wine." I didn't stop. I opened the heavy front door and stepped out into the cold November evening. The air was crisp and smelled of wood smoke and decaying leaves. I walked down the front steps and stood by my car, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, my thumb hovering over the contacts list. I wanted to call Jessa, my best friend. But I knew if I heard her voice, I would start crying. And if I started crying, I wouldn't be able to stop. The screen lit up with a notification from Facebook. It was a tag. I opened the app. It was a video posted 5 minutes ago by my cousin Mike, but the caption read, "Family traditions, tough love for the lost sheep. Hashtag Thanksgiving hashtag. Tough love, hashtag family first." The video was a short clip, clearly taken before I arrived. It showed my father removing the chair from the dining room, carrying it out while my mother laughed and held the camera. "Where are you taking it, Dad?" Mike's voice asked from behind the camera. "To the garage," my father boomed, grinning. VIP. Seating is for people with VIP credit scores. The camera panned to my mother, who waved. "We are teaching a lesson today. No seat for disappointments." I stared at the screen. The video already had 12 likes. 12 people, some of them relatives, some of them family friends, had watched my parents plan to humiliate me and clicked a little blue thumbs up. They were framing this as a prank, a harmless bit of family roasting. A car door slammed across the street, startling me. I looked up. Marla Denton, the neighbor who lived in the blue ranch house opposite my parents', was walking down her driveway to check her mailbox. She was an older woman, perhaps in her late 60s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She paused when she saw me standing by my car, clutching my phone. "Hannah?" she called out. Her voice carried clearly across the quiet street. I straightened my spine, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "Hi, Mrs. Denton, happy Thanksgiving." She didn't smile back. She walked to the edge of the road, looking at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. She looked at the house behind me, where the warm light spilled out of the windows, and then back at me. "Is everything all right over there?" she asked. "I saw your father hauling a dining chair out to the garage about an hour ago. Seemed like an odd time to be moving furniture." The lie rose to my lips automatically. "Oh, we just needed more space. Everything is fine." But it died in my throat. Marla wasn't looking at me with pity. She was looking at me with concern. There was a difference. Pity looked down on you. Concern looked at you levelly. "It is a crowded house this year," I said, carefully neutral. Marla hummed, a low, skeptical sound. "Well, if you need a quiet place to sit, my porch swing is always open. The wind is cold, but the company is better than some. Thank you. Mrs. Denton?" I said. She nodded once, pulled her coat tighter, and walked back up her driveway. But before she went inside, she turned and watched me for another moment, as if making sure I wasn't going to shatter. I stood there alone in the driveway. The wind bit through my blazer. I had two choices. I could get in my car, drive away, and let them win. I could let them tell the story of how Hannah ruined Thanksgiving by storming out. How Hannah couldn't take a joke. How Hannah was fragile and broken. They would feast on that story for years. It would become the new family legend. Or, I remembered the trunk of my car. I was a project manager. I spent my weekends hiking and camping to get away from the noise of the city. I was practical. I was prepared. I walked to the back of my sedan and popped the trunk. Inside, nestled between my emergency kit and a blanket, was my camping stool. It was a simple, three-legged canvas thing, sturdy and functional. I used it when I sat by the fire on solo trips. I grabbed it. It felt light in my hand. I closed the trunk. The sound echoed in the quiet street. I walked back to the house. I didn't rush. I didn't stomp. I moved with the deliberate calm of someone who had a job to do. When I re-entered the house, the atmosphere had shifted. The laughter had died down. They were all in the dining room now. My mother was pouring wine. My father was carving the turkey. They looked up when I walked in. My father's face lit up with a smirk, expecting me to be dragging the heavy oak chair from the garage. Panting and humbled. "Well, look who decided to join us," he started. "Did you find—" I didn't look at him. I walked straight to the empty space at the table. I unfolded the canvas camping stool. It made a sharp thwack sound as the legs locked into place. I set it down on the bare floorboards. It was significantly lower than the other chairs. It looked ridiculous against the elegance of the gold runner and the fine china. I sat down. The stool was low, so my chin was barely level with the table. I had to reach up to rest my hands on the edge of the wood. But I sat there, spine straight, looking directly at the centerpiece. The room went dead silent. This was not in the script. The script called for begging. It called for anger. It called for the heavy chair from the garage. It did not call for a camping stool and absolute silence. "Hannah," my mother said, her voice trembling slightly. "What are you doing?" "I am sitting for dinner," I said calmly. "That looks ridiculous," Justin said, breaking his silence. "Just go get the real chair." "Hannah, stop making a scene." I turned my head slowly to look at my brother. "I am not making a scene. Justin, I am eating dinner. Mom said there was no seat for me. I brought my own." My father put down the carving knife. It clattered against the platter. He looked annoyed, his jaw working. He didn't like it when the variables changed. He liked control. "It is disrespectful," he said, his voice dropping to that low register that used to terrify me. "We set a beautiful table. You are mocking it. I am solving a problem." "Dad," I said, "isn't that what you always told me to do? Be a problem solver?" I picked up the linen napkin from the place where my plate should have been and spread it on my lap. "Please, continue," I said. "The turkey looks dry if it sits too long." My mother looked at my father. She looked panicked. The camera on the tripod in the hallway was still recording. But this wasn't the footage they wanted. This looked weird. It looked abusive. It looked like they were forcing their daughter to sit on a child's stool while they sat on thrones. "Fine," my father snapped. "Eat on a camp stool. See if I care." He stabbed a slice of turkey and dropped it onto a plate. The dinner began in a strangling silence. The only sounds were the scraping of silverware on china and the clinking of glasses. I didn't have a plate, so I waited. Eventually, Aunt Linda, seemingly unable to bear the tension, passed me a plate of turkey and stuffing. "Thank you," I said quietly. I ate with precise, mechanical movements. I didn't look at anyone. I could feel their eyes on me. They were waiting for me to crack. They were waiting for the outburst. "So," Justin said, clearing his throat loudly, "how is the job? Hannah? Still at that— what is it? That tech startup?" "It is a systems management firm," I said, "and it is going well. We just closed the fiscal year. I was promoted to senior project manager last month." I said it casually, but the reaction was immediate and strange. My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. She glanced at my father. My father narrowed his eyes. "Promoted?" he asked. "Does that come with a raise?" "Yes," I said, "a significant one." The air in the room changed instantly. It wasn't the cold tension of before. It was something else, a sharp, predatory alertness. My father exchanged a look with my mother. It was a micro-expression, a quick dart of the eyes that communicated a volume of information I couldn't decipher. It looked like calculation. It looked like fear. "Well, that is good," my father said. But his voice lacked any warmth. It sounded tight. Expensive city you live in. Costs are up everywhere. He took a large drink of his wine. We were worried, my mother added quickly. Too quickly. You know, with your history. The stress. We didn't want you taking on too much responsibility if you weren't ready. I am ready, I said. Are you? My father asked. He leaned forward. Responsibilities are heavy. Hannah, they require stability, a clean slate. He emphasized the words clean slate with a peculiar intensity. I put my fork down. Why are you talking about my stability? We just want what is best for you, my mother said, her smile flickering back on like a faulty light bulb. We know how hard it is to manage assets when you are on your own. I looked around the table. Justin was staring at his mashed potatoes as if they contained the secrets of the universe. Aunt Linda was drinking her wine rapidly. They weren't happy I was doing well. They were nervous. Why? I looked at my father. He was watching me with a gaze that I recognized from his business calls. The look of a man assessing a liability. Is there something you want to ask me? I asked. No, he said, waving his hand dismissively, though his eyes remained hard. Just making conversation. Eat your stuffing. Hannah, you look thin. I took a bite of the stuffing. It tasted like ash. I realized then that the missing chair wasn't just a punishment for some perceived failure of character. It was a distraction. It was a piece of theater designed to keep me off balance, to keep me feeling small and grateful for scraps. But why did they need me to feel small right now? If I was doing well, if I was independent, shouldn't that be a relief to them? Unless my independence was a problem. I looked at my mother again. She was texting under the table. She caught me looking and jerked her phone away, sliding it into her lap. I took a sip of water. My camping stool creaked loudly in the silence. I didn't apologize for the noise. I sat there, low to the ground, surrounded by the people who shared my DNA, and I felt a sudden, chilling certainty that I was not a guest at this table. I was a resource, and they were trying to figure out how to mine me. The dinner moved forward with the grinding, mechanical friction of a rusted gear. From my low vantage point on the camping stool, the perspective of the room was warped. I was looking up at everyone, at their chins, their nostrils, the undersides of their wrists as they cut their meat. It was a physical manifestation of the hierarchy my parents had always tried to enforce, but my refusal to be embarrassed by it had curdled the air. I finished the small portion of turkey on my plate and stood up to clear the dishes, driven by the muscle memory of a daughter who had been trained to earn her keep. My mother fluttered her hand, signaling for me to sit, but her eyes were cold. Sit down. Hannah, she said. Linda can help me. I ignored her. I needed to move. My legs were cramping from the low seat, and the silence at the table had become a physical weight pressing against my temples. I picked up the serving platter, which was slick with cooling gravy, and carried it into the kitchen. The kitchen was a stark contrast to the dining room's dim, candlelit performance. Here, the overhead fluorescent lights were humming, casting a harsh, clinical glare on the carnage of the meal, pots crusted with mashed potatoes, the turkey carcass sitting in a pool of grease, empty wine bottles clustered like bowing monks. Aunt Linda followed me in with a stack of dirty plates. She was a woman who had spent her life making herself small to avoid the crossfire of her siblings' egos, and she moved with a nervous, skittering energy. My mother came in a moment later, ostensibly to fetch the cranberry sauce, but really to manage the narrative. She didn't see me standing in the pantry alcove, scraping the platter into the trash. Just keep her steady tonight. Linda, my mother whispered. Her voice was low, urgent, and stripped of the sugary cadence she used in front of the camera. We need to get through the coffee course before we bring up the paperwork. If she flares up too early, it ruins the pacing. I froze, the heavy ceramic platter gripping my fingers. Just keep her steady. It was the language of animal husbandry. It was how you talked about a spooked horse or a dangerous dog. It wasn't how you spoke about a daughter who had just been promoted to manage complex systems for a tech firm. I listened as Aunt Linda murmured a vague assent, the sound of water running in the sink covering the rest of their exchange. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Paperwork, pacing. They weren't just being cruel for sport. This was a staged event. The missing chair, the cameras, the psychological prodding. It was all a preamble to something transactional. I stepped out of the alcove. My mother jumped, her hand flying to her throat. "Oh," she gasped. "Hannah, you are so quiet. You used to be so loud." I set the platter in the sink. I didn't look at her. If I looked at her, I would scream. And screaming was exactly what they wanted. I walked back into the dining room, my mind racing. Back at the table, the conversation had shifted to the safe, self-congratulatory territory of my brother's architecture firm. Justin was leaning back in his chair, swirling his wine, recounting a client dispute he had masterfully de-escalated. I sat back down on my canvas stool. The drop in height was jarring every time. Justin looked down at me, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "You know, Hannah," he said, interrupting his own story, "seeing you down there, it reminds me of that summer you moved back home. Remember? When you spent 3 weeks sleeping on the floor because you said the bed felt too high?" The table erupted in a ripple of polite, knowing laughter. I stiffened. He was talking about the burnout, 3 years ago. I had collapsed from exhaustion after working 80-hour weeks for a corrupt logistics company. I hadn't slept on the floor because the bed was too high. I had slept on the floor because my nervous system was so shot that soft surfaces felt like they were swallowing me. I had been sick. I had been terrified. "I remember," I said evenly. "I was recovering from a medical event." "Justin," my father waved a hand, dismissing my correction. "Oh, medical event," he scoffed. "It was a rough patch. Hannah, you were overwhelmed. You have always been. Porous, porous," my mother echoed, returning from the kitchen with the cranberry sauce. "That is the perfect word. Honey, Hannah just lets everything in. She feels things so big." She placed the bowl down and looked at the guests, at Cousin Mike, at Sarah, with a performative sympathy. We had to walk on eggshells for months. She told them, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. One wrong word, and Hannah would just shut down. "We are just so glad she is functional again. Functional, not successful, not happy, functional. Like a repaired toaster." "I am more than functional," I said, my voice tight. "I am thriving. I own my own condo. I have a savings account. I have a career." My father chuckled, a dark, wet sound. "Savings," he said, shaking his head. "In this economy? It is cute that you think you have savings. Hannah, real wealth, that is a different beast. Inflation is eating cash alive. If you are just sitting on cash, you are losing money every second." He looked around the table, his eyes gleaming with a manic intensity. "We have to pull together," he announced, addressing the group but looking at me. "That is what families do. We consolidate. We leverage our collective strength. It is expensive out there. Gas, groceries, the cost of maintaining a legacy. We can't have stragglers." I narrowed my eyes. "Dad, are you asking for money?" The question cut through his monologue like a razor. He blinked. "Offended? Money?" he spat. "Don't be vulgar. Hannah, I'm talking about strategy. I am talking about survival. You always make everything so transactional." He took a large gulp of wine, his face flushing. "But since you brought it up," he continued, his voice slicker now, slippery, "have you seen the interest rates lately? Criminal. Absolutely criminal. A man works his whole life to build credit, and the banks treat him like a beggar. It is a rigged system, unless you have fresh inputs. Fresh inputs." He was looking at me, not at my face, but at the space around me, as if seeing the invisible data cloud of my credit score hovering over my head. Before I could press him, the doorbell rang. The sound was jarring in the tense room. My mother looked annoyed. "Who on earth is that?" she snapped. "We are in the middle of dinner." "I'll get it," I said, standing up quickly. I needed to get away from my father's staring eyes. I walked to the front door and pulled it open. Marla Denton stood on the porch, clutching a small cardboard box. The wind was whipping her gray hair across her face, but her expression was rock solid. "Hannah," she said, her voice loud enough to carry into the hallway, "I am so sorry to disturb the feast, but this was on my porch. It says it was delivered 2 days ago, but I only just saw it behind the planter. It is addressed to your father." She held out the box. It was an Amazon package. Clearly old. The label was faded. It was a flimsy excuse. Marla was checking on me. I took the box. "Thank you, Marla. You didn't have to walk over in the cold." She didn't let go of the box immediately. She leaned in, looking past my shoulder into the dining room. From the angle of the doorway, she had a clear line of sight to the table. She saw the gold runner, the crystal glasses, the 5 high-backed chairs, and the empty space where I had been sitting on a camp stool. Her eyes widened slightly, then narrowed into slits of pure, cold disapproval. She looked back at me. Her grip on the box tightened. "Is that—" she started, her voice dropping. "Is that where you are sitting?" I felt a flush of shame, hot and prickly. "Yes." Marla looked at the camera tripod still standing sentinel in the hallway. She looked at the ring lights reflecting in the foyer mirror. "Honey," she said, her voice rough, "you know you can come over. I have a frozen lasagna. It is not turkey, but it comes with a chair." I smiled, and for the first time that day, it was real. "I know, Marla. I might take you up on that later, but I need to finish this." She nodded slowly. "You be careful. Hannah, I don't like the smell of this house tonight." She released the box and stepped back. I watched her walk down the path, her figure sturdy and reliable against the dark. When I turned back, my mother was standing in the hallway, arms crossed. "What did she want?" she demanded. "That woman is such a busybody." "She brought a package," I said, handing it to her. My mother snatched it. She is always spying, watching the windows. "It is pathetic, really. Come back to the table. Doctor, Laird will be here soon for dessert." "Dr. Laird?" I asked. "Why is Dr. Laird coming?" Evan Laird was a general practitioner. My parents had known socially for decades. He was a man who smiled too much and prescribed sedatives to housewives who complained about their husbands. He wasn't a close friend. He was a utility. "He is lonely," my mother said vaguely, turning back to the dining room. "And he brings good wine." I didn't follow her immediately. The stress of the last hour was sitting in my bladder. "I am going to use the restroom," I said. My mother waved a hand without looking back. I slipped into the downstairs powder room and locked the door. The silence was instant and blissful. I leaned against the sink, breathing deeply. Staring at myself in the mirror, I looked pale. My eyes were wide and dark. I looked, ironically, exactly as unstable as they claimed I was. I turned on the tap to wash my hands. As I reached for the hand towel, my elbow knocked a stack of papers sitting on the marble counter. They fluttered to the floor. I sighed and bent down to pick them up. It looked like the junk mail pile: catalogs, flyers, coupons. My parents often left mail in the powder room. It was one of their chaotic habits. I gathered the slick pages of a furniture catalog and a flyer for gutter cleaning. Then I saw the sheet of standard printer paper at the bottom of the pile. It was an email printout. I picked it up. From client services at wealthguardfiduciary.com to roger.green@hmail.com. Subject, appointment confirmation. H, green/signature required. My breath caught in my throat. I sat down on the closed toilet lid, my hands trembling. "Dear Roger, this email confirms your appointment for next Tuesday, November 28th, at 10 a.m. As discussed, please ensure Hannah is present to sign the guarantor addendum for the Hearthstone Ridge Bridge loan. If she cannot attend physically, the notary can accept the pre-signed power of attorney we discussed, provided the dates align. Best, Shelby T." I read it 3 times. Hannah is present. Guarantor addendum. Power of attorney. I had not agreed to an appointment. I had not heard of Hearthstone Ridge. I had certainly not discussed a power of attorney. The date of the email was from yesterday. My father was moving pieces on a board I didn't even know I was playing on. He wasn't just asking for money. He was manufacturing my consent. I stood up. The room felt suddenly too small. The walls inching closer. I folded the paper and shoved it into my bra, under the heavy fabric of my sweater. I couldn't leave it there. It was evidence. I unlocked the door and stepped out. My mother was in the hallway, adjusting the tripod. She jumped when she saw me. "Jesus, Hannah," she hissed. "You are sneaking around again." I didn't let her deflect. I walked right up to her, invading her personal space. "Mom," I said. My voice was low, trembling with a frequency that wasn't fear anymore. It was rage. "Why is there an email in the bathroom about an appointment for me next Tuesday?" Her face went through a complex series of gymnastics. First, blank surprise, then a flash of genuine fear. Then, it settled into irritation. She let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "You were snooping? On Thanksgiving?" It was on the counter. "Mom, why am I meeting with a fiduciary? What is Hearthstone Ridge?" She waved her hand, as if swatting away a fly. "Oh, it is just paperwork. Your father is updating the estate planning. We wanted to surprise you. We are putting some assets in your name. You should be grateful." Lying. She was lying. I could see the pulse jumping in her neck. "Assets in my name?" I asked. "Or debt?" The email said, "Guarantor." That means I am backing something. She grabbed my arm. Her fingers were like claws. "Stop it. Stop this right now. You are misinterpreting everything because you are agitated. You forgot. Hannah, we told you about this months ago. You have just forgotten. Like you forget everything else when you get like this. Gaslighting. Pure, distilled, 100 proof gaslighting. I didn't forget," I said, pulling my arm away, "and I am not like this." I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I needed to check if they were this far along in the process. There would be footprints. "What are you doing?" my mother demanded. "Put that phone away. It is rude." I ignored her. I opened my banking app. Face ID recognized me. I tapped on the credit score tab. It usually took a few seconds to load. The little wheel spun. My mother was hovering over my shoulder. "Hannah, if you ruin tonight with your paranoia." The screen loaded. New alert. Soft inquiry. Lender, Hearthstone Ridge. Holdings/WG. Financial. Date. November 22nd. Status. Reviewing. My stomach dropped so hard I felt weightless. A soft inquiry meant someone had checked my credit. They had my social security number. They had my address. They were shopping my identity around. I looked up at my mother. The screen was still glowing in my hand. "You ran my credit," I whispered. My mother's face hardened. She stopped pretending to be the confused. "Aggrieved hostess, we are your parents," she hissed. "We needed to see if it was viable before we bothered you with the details. We are trying to save the house. Hannah, do you want us on the street? Is that what you want?" So it wasn't estate planning. It was a rescue mission, and I was the life raft. I walked past her, straight into the dining room. Doctor. Evan Laird had arrived. He was standing by the sideboard, shaking hands with my father. He was a tall man with silver hair and a soothing, practiced baritone voice. "Ah, and here she is." "Doctor," Laird said, turning to me with a benevolent smile. "The prodigal daughter. Happy Thanksgiving. Hannah." I didn't return the greeting. I walked to the end of the table and stood there. I didn't sit on the camping stool. I stood tall. "Dad." I said. My father turned, a glass of wine in his hand. He looked annoyed at the interruption. "Yes? Did you use my social security number to apply for a loan with Hearthstone Ridge Holdings?" The room went dead silent. Aunt Linda stopped chewing. Justin looked up from his phone. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to cease. My father stared at me. He didn't look guilty. He looked furious that I had broken the rules of the play. He threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, booming sound that bounced off the walls. "Oh, here we go," he said, gesturing to the room. I told you she would start." He looked at Dr. Laird. "You see, Evan, She gets an idea in her head, a little conspiracy theory, and she just runs with it. I held up my phone. I have the alert right here. Dad, a credit inquiry, dated 2 days ago. Don't start your little crusade. Hannah, he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. It is a preliminary check, he yelled. It is standard. We are trying to build a family trust. We need to know everyone's standing. You should be thanking me for including you. Considering your history of financial impulsiveness. Impulsiveness? I saved 50% of my income. You forged my consent. I said, that is fraud. Doctor? Laird stepped forward. His hands raised in a calming gesture. He moved like he was approaching a jumper on a ledge. Hannah, he said softly. Hannah, look at me. I looked at him. His eyes were kind, but it was a weaponized kindness. It was the kindness you use to sedate someone. Your father is just trying to look out for the family. He said, these legal matters are complex. Sometimes we misunderstand things when we are feeling emotional. He turned to my father. Roger, maybe we should let her sit down? She looks very flushed. He was diagnosing me. Right there in the dining room. He was building the case for my instability in real time. If I yelled, I was hysterical. If I cried, I was depressed. If I fought back, I was paranoid. I looked around the room. Justin was watching me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. Aunt Linda was staring at her plate. They were all in on it. Or at least, they were all willing to let it happen to keep the peace. I realized then that I couldn't win this argument here. The court was rigged. The jury was bribed. I am leaving. I said. I turned toward the hallway. My mother moved faster than I expected. She rushed to the archway between the dining room and the hall, blocking my path. Tears were already streaming down her face. It was an impressive instant release. Hannah, no, she wailed. You can't leave. We haven't had pie. Mom, move, I said. If you walk out that door, you will ruin Thanksgiving, she screamed. Everyone will know. Everyone will know you abandoned us. She grabbed the lapels of my blazer. Please, Hannah, just sit down. Just sign the paper when Dad brings it out. It is nothing. It is just a signature. Don't be selfish. I looked down at her hands clutching my jacket. Just a signature. That was the truth. They didn't want me. They wanted my autograph on a loan document. I carefully peeled her fingers off my jacket. I am not signing anything, I said, and I am taking my chair. I walked back to the table, folded my camping stool, and picked it up. My father was purple with rage. Go on then, he shouted. Run away. Go back to your little apartment and your empty life. But don't come crawling back when the world breaks you again. Doctor, Laird sighed, a sound of professional disappointment. A shame, he murmured. I really thought she was doing better. I walked to the door, the camping stool tucked under my arm like a shield. I opened the door and stepped out into the night. The cold air hit my face, drying the sweat on my forehead. I walked to my car, thrown the stool in the trunk, and got in. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice before I could start the ignition. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw the curtain in the living room window twitch. The red light of the camera was probably still blinking, recording the empty space where I had refused to be a prop. I didn't ruin Thanksgiving. I survived it. But as I turned onto the main road, the notification on my phone buzzed again. Another alert. The nightmare wasn't over. It had just been capitalized. I drove until the house was just a glow in my rearview mirror, and then I drove until it wasn't even that. I didn't have a destination. I just needed pavement between me and the dining room where my father had laughed at the idea of my financial autonomy. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour pharmacy in the next town over, Briar Glen. The lot was bathed in the sickly hum of sodium vapor lights, turning the asphalt a bruised shade of orange. My hands were still shaking on the steering wheel, a tremor that traveled all the way up to my shoulders. I turned off the engine, but the silence of the car felt too loud, filled with the echoes of my mother's performative sobbing. I needed an anchor. I pulled my phone from the passenger seat. It was late, past 10 in the evening, but I dialed Jessa Moraine. She answered on the second ring. There was no groggy holiday confusion in her voice, just the sharp, clear alertness that made her the best crisis manager I knew. "Tell me you are safe." Jessa said, "I am in a parking lot." I said, "I left. I walked out." "Good," she said. I could hear the faint click of a keyboard in the background. She was probably already pulling up a map or a schedule, her brain automatically organizing my chaos. "Did they let you leave?" My mother tried to block the door. She said I was ruining Thanksgiving, but, Jessa, it wasn't just the chair. I took a deep breath, the air in the car feeling thin and cold. "They ran my credit." I said, "I found an email. They have an appointment with a fiduciary next week. My father talked about fresh inputs." The typing stopped. Jessa was silent for 3 seconds. When she spoke, her voice had dropped an octave. It wasn't the voice of a friend anymore. It was the voice of a strategist. "Do you have your credit reports locked?" she asked. The question hung in the air. Simple and devastating. I don't know," I stammered. I check the score. I get the little alerts from my bank app. Checking the score is looking at the weather." Jessa said, "Locking the report is boarding up the windows. Hannah, if they have your social security number, and they do, because they claimed you as a dependent for 20 years, and they are desperate. They don't need your permission. They just need your silence." I felt a wave of nausea. I haven't checked the actual bureau reports in months. I admitted. "Do it now," Jessa commanded. "Stay on the line. Do it right now." I put her on speaker and navigated to the credit bureau site on my browser. My fingers felt thick and clumsy. I had to reset my password because I hadn't used the direct login in so long. The wait for the 2-factor authentication code felt like hours. When the dashboard finally loaded, it looked normal at first glance. My score was excellent. 780, green numbers, happy graphs. "Look at the inquiries," Jessa said, her voice tinny through the phone speaker. "Look at the hard pulls." I tapped the tab. There were the standard ones. My mortgage lender from 2 years ago. My car lease. But then I saw it. 6 months ago. A hard inquiry from a company called Titan Capital Auto. I frowned. "Jessa, there is an auto loan inquiry from June. I didn't buy a car in June. Is there an open account?" she asked sharply. I scrolled down to the accounts section. No open auto loan. Denied. I whispered, "Or abandoned." "Keep looking," Jessa said. "Look for authorized user accounts." I scrolled further. In the revolving credit section, under my own credit cards, there was a line item I didn't recognize. It was a store credit card for a home improvement chain. The balance was 0, but the limit was $5,000. The status was open/authorized user. I stared at it. An authorized user meant someone had added me to their card to boost their score, or to piggyback off mine. Someone added me to a hardware store card. I said, "Your father likes to renovate," Jessa said dryly. "Hannah, listen to me. This isn't a glitch. They have been testing the fence. The auto loan was a test. The card was a test. They are seeing what gets flagged and what slides through. And because you didn't scream about the hardware card, they think the door is unlocked." I felt a cold sweat break out on my back. The chair. The humiliation. It all felt so petty. But this was systemic. "What do I do?" I asked. "Lock it," Jessa said. "Freeze all 3 bureaus. Right now. It won't stop what is already in motion. But it stops new damage. And then you need to find out exactly what that appointment next week is for." "I can't go back there," I said. "You don't have to go back for dinner," Jessa said. "But you need intel. Did you leave anything?" I looked at the empty passenger seat. My mind flashed back to the kitchen island, the sweet potato gratin, the expensive ceramic dish I had bought in a boutique in the city. It was trivial, but it was property. My dish. I said, "Go back tomorrow morning," Jessa said. "Early. When they are hung over on tryptophan and self-righteousness. Get your dish, and while you are there, look them in the eye. Let them see you aren't the scared little girl who ran away. Let them see the project manager." I slept in my car. I drove to a rest stop on the highway, locked the doors, and curled up in the back seat, under the emergency blanket I kept in my trunk. I didn't want to pay for a hotel and leave a digital trail my father might somehow see. I felt paranoid, hunted. I woke up at 6 in the morning with a stiff neck and a resolve that felt like iron. I used the restroom at a gas station, washed my face with cold water, and drank a black coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. By 7:30, I was pulling back into the driveway at Maple Hollow. The house looked innocent in the morning light. The frost on the lawn sparkled. The curtains were drawn. It was the picture of suburban tranquility. I got out of the car. The air was biting. Before I could reach the front door, the garage side door opened. My brother, Justin, stepped out. He was wearing a fleece jacket over his pajamas and holding a steaming mug. He looked terrible. His eyes were puffy, and there was a gray cast to his skin. He stopped when he saw me. He didn't look surprised, just weary. "You came back," he said. "I came for my dish." I said. He nodded slowly. He took a sip of his coffee, looking out over the yard. "Mom is a mess. You know," he said conversationally. "She was up half the night crying. She says you have become hard." I didn't flinch. "I am not hard. Justin, I am an adult. There is a difference." He sighed, a long plume of white breath escaping into the cold air. "Look, Hannah, I know last night was intense. The chair thing. It was Dad's idea of a joke. You know his humor. He likes to poke the bear. It wasn't a joke." I said, "It was a stress test." Justin looked at me then. Really looked at me. The smug neutrality he usually wore like a shield was gone. In its place was something that looked like desperation. "They are under a lot of pressure." "Hannah," he said, his voice lowering, "you don't know the half of it. The firm, the consulting business isn't what it used to be. Dad made some investments last year that went south, badly. So he is stealing from me?" I asked. Justin winced. "Don't call it that. He is not stealing. He is leveraging. He just needs a bridge. A temporary bridge." He took a step toward me. "Just help them one time. Hannah, just sign the thing. It keeps the family image intact. If they default, word gets out. In this town? In Dad's circle? It would kill him." I stared at my brother, the successful architect, the golden son. "Why don't you sign it?" I asked. Justin looked away. He shifted his weight. I can't. My liquidity is tied up in the new development, and my credit utilization is high right now. I can't take the hit." "You mean you won't take the risk?" I corrected. "But you are fine with serving me up on a platter." "It is not a risk for you," he insisted, his voice rising. "You have nothing to lose. You don't have a family to support. You don't have a reputation in this town. It is just a signature on a collateral hold." "Collateral on what?" I pressed. "What is the asset?" He hesitated. He looked at the house, as if checking if our parents were listening. "It is a holding company," he muttered. "Hearthstone Ridge Holdings. They are bundling the house and the commercial property, but the bank needs a guarantor with clean history because of the lien on the primary residence." He stopped, realizing he had said too much. "Hearthstone Ridge," I repeated. "That is the name on the credit inquiry." Justin rubbed his face. "Look, just don't make it a legal thing, okay? Dad is talking about lawyers if you don't cooperate. He says he can prove you verbally agreed to back the venture when you were living here." "When I was recovering from burnout?" I asked. "I was sleeping 18 hours a day. I didn't agree to buy a sandwich, let alone back a holding company." Justin shrugged. A gesture of helpless complicity. "He has recordings. Hannah, voice memos. He says he has you on tape saying, 'Whatever you need, Dad, just handle it.'" My blood ran cold. I remembered those days. I remembered the fog of exhaustion. I remembered my father coming into the room where I lay in the dark, asking me vague questions, and me mumbling answers just to make him leave. "He recorded me?" I whispered. "When I was sick?" "He keeps everything," Justin said. "You know that." I walked past him. I didn't want to talk to him anymore. I felt sick. I walked to the front door and let myself in. The door was unlocked. The house smelled of stale wine and sugar. I walked into the kitchen. My dish was exactly where I had left it, cleaned and dried, sitting on the counter. My mother, for all her cruelty, was incapable of leaving a dirty dish overnight. I picked it up. Hannah? My mother stood in the doorway of the dining room. She was wearing a silk robe, her face devoid of makeup. She looked older, smaller. I turned. "I want to see the group chat," I said. She blinked. What? "The family group chat," I said calmly. "The one where you planned the chair. The one where Cousin Mike said I needed humility. I want to see the thread." Her face tightened. She pulled her robe tighter. "Don't be ridiculous," she spat. "You are obsessed. You are always digging for things to be upset about. Show me the chat." "Mom," I said, "if it was just a harmless joke, show me the setup. Show me where you told everyone it was funny." She took a step back. "I will do no such thing. It is private. You are spying on us. You are trying to twist our words. You are gaslighting me," I said, "and I know about Hearthstone Ridge. Justin told me." Her eyes went wide. She looked toward the hallway, as if expecting Justin to appear and deny it. "Justin doesn't understand the nuances," she said quickly. "It is high finance. Hannah, you wouldn't understand the structure. I understand that you need my signature because your credit is shot." I said, "And I understand that you removed my seat at the table to make me feel small, so I would sign whatever you put in front of me." My mother's face crumbled. But not into sadness, into ugliness. "We gave you life," she screamed. "We gave you a home when you were broken. You owe us." I turned and walked out. I didn't run. I walked. I carried my ceramic dish like the crown jewels. As I reached my car, I saw Marla Denton standing at the end of her driveway across the street. She was bundled in a heavy coat, watching. I put the dish in the passenger seat and walked over to her. I needed to know. "Marla," I said. She looked at me. Her eyes were sad. "You went back in." She said, "I had to get something." I said, "Marla, yesterday, you said you saw my father moving the chair. Did you hear anything else?" Marla looked at the ground, then at the house. She lowered her voice. "I was gardening," she said. "About 2 weeks ago. Your father was on the back patio. He was on the phone. He was shouting. He has that voice that carries, you know?" I nodded. He was yelling at someone. "Maybe a banker?" Marla said. He said, "I will get the signature. Don't worry about the girl. She is soft. I will make it look clean." She looked up at me. And then he said something that made my blood boil. "Hannah," he said, "if she balks, we will just say she is off her meds again. Who is the bank going to believe? A pillar of the community or a hysterical woman?" I felt the air leave my lungs. "So the chair," I whispered. "It wasn't a prank." "Honey," Marla said, "it was a provoke. They wanted you to make a scene. They wanted witnesses to see you losing it." "Thank you." "Marla," I said. My voice was trembling. She reached out and squeezed my hand through the open window of the car. I hadn't realized I had walked back to my door. "You fight them. Hannah, you hear me? You fight them." I drove straight to Briar Glen. I didn't go home. I couldn't go home yet. I needed armor. I found the office of Alden Pike on a Google search for consumer protection attorney. His office was in a strip mall, sandwiched between a chiropractor and a dry cleaner. It wasn't the high-rise glass tower my father would have hired, and that was exactly why I chose it. Alden Pike was a man in his 50s with a fraying cardigan and a desk buried under mountains of paper. He listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. He took notes on a yellow legal pad with a fountain pen. When I finished, telling him about the chair, the credit inquiry, the email, Justin's confession, Marla's overhearing, he set the pen down. "It is a classic pattern," he said. His voice was dry, like old parchment. "We call it sexually transmitted debt in divorce cases, but in families, it is inheritance by theft." He leaned back. "They are weaponizing the narrative. Hannah, that is clear. The chair was theater. If you had flipped the table, they would have called the police or recorded it. That police report or video becomes evidence of your instability. Then, when they forge your signature, or coerce it, and you try to fight it later, they present the evidence. Your Honor, our daughter is mentally unwell. She signed this, and now she is hallucinating that she didn't. I felt sick. But surely forensic accounting proves who spent the money? Money is fungible, Alden said, and families are messy. Judges hate family financial disputes. They want to believe in the sanctity of the hearth. If your parents have a recording of you saying, "Handle it" from 3 years ago, and they combine that with a power of attorney they might have manufactured, it gets murky. He looked at me over his glasses. Did they ever have access to your digital life? Passwords? Physical documents? I shook my head. No, I have been independent since college. Think back. Alden said, the burnout period. You lived there. I frowned. I brought my laptop, but it was password protected. Did you ever use their computer? To print a resume? To check tax returns? I froze. Yes. When I was moving out, I didn't have a printer. I used the desktop in the den to print my lease agreement for the new apartment and my bank statements for the landlord. Alden nodded. And did you email the files to yourself, or did you use a flash drive? I logged into my cloud drive on their desktop. And did you log out? The memory was fuzzy. I had been so eager to leave. I had been packing boxes. My mother had been hovering, criticizing my packing tape usage. I don't know, I whispered. Alden picked up his pen again. Assume they have the keys, he said. Assume they have copies of your old tax returns, your driver's license scan, your birth certificate. They have the toolkit to build a synthetic Hannah who agrees to everything they want. He wrote something down and tore off the sheet. Here is the prescription, he said. Freeze. Don't just lock. You already did the bureaus? Good. Now do check systems. That stops them from opening bank accounts in your name. The affidavit. We draft a sworn affidavit today stating that you are aware of unauthorized inquiries and that you categorically deny any consent for lending. We notarize it. It is a time-stamped shield. The letter. You send a communication, not a text they can delete. A certified letter and an email. Short, unemotional. He looked at me. You need to tell them the bank is closed. I left Alden's office an hour later. I sat in my car in the strip mall parking lot and typed the email on my phone. My thumbs hovered over the keys. This was it. This was the moment I stopped being their child and started being their adversary. To Roger, green@hmail.com, Catherine, green@hmail.com, C, Justin, green@archfirm. Come. Subject, unauthorized financial activity. Cease and desist. Mom and Dad. I have identified unauthorized credit inquiries and pending applications using my identity, specifically related to Hearthstone Ridge Holdings. I have not agreed to act as a guarantor, cosigner, or partner in any venture. I have placed a security freeze on all my credit files. I have notified the bureaus of the fraudulent inquiry. Any document purporting to bear my signature regarding this matter is invalid. If you proceed with the appointment on Tuesday using my name, I will file a police report for identity theft. Do not contact me about finances again until I receive copies of every document you have generated with my name on it. Hannah. I pressed send. I stared at the screen. It said sent. The feeling wasn't triumph. It wasn't relief. It was a heavy, suffocating grief. I had just fired my parents. I started the car. The radio came on, playing a generic holiday jingle. I turned it off. I drove out of Briar Glen, heading back toward the city, toward my real life. But as I merged onto the highway, my phone buzzed. It wasn't a text. It was an email notification. From Roger, green@hmail.com, subject, unauthorized financial activity, cease and desist. Hannah, we are very concerned about this email. It sounds like you are spiraling again. We are scheduling a family meeting. We can't let you hurt yourself like this. I gripped the steering wheel. They weren't backing down. They were doubling down. They were going to play the crazy card before the ink was even dry. I looked at the road ahead. The gray asphalt stretched out endlessly. Bring it on. I thought. I brought my own chair. The fallout from Thanksgiving did not arrive with a bang. It arrived like a gas leak. Silent, invisible, and slowly poisoning the air until I couldn't breathe. By Monday morning, I was back in my apartment in the city, trying to focus on a system migration plan for a client. But my phone kept lighting up with notifications that had nothing to do with work. My family, having failed to secure my signature at the dinner table, had taken the battle to the court of public opinion. It started with Aunt Linda. She posted a photo of the turkey carcass on Facebook, the lighting dim and melancholic. The caption read, "So grateful for family, even when hearts are heavy. Please pray for the Green family as we navigate some difficult stormy waters. We just want everyone to be healthy and whole again." It was a masterclass in vague booking. To the casual observer, it looked like someone had cancer or a marriage was ending, but to the inner circle, the cousins, the neighbors, the church friends, it was a dog whistle. It signaled that Hannah was the storm. Hannah was the one making things difficult. Hannah was the one who was not whole. Then came the comments. Sending love. Linda. Hope she finds her way back to you. Stay strong. The prodigal son story is in the Bible for a reason. Love always wins, even when mental health struggles make it hard to see. I stared at the screen, my coffee turning cold in my hand. They were painting me as unstable. They were constructing a narrative where my refusal to be financially abused was actually a symptom of a mental health crisis. It was brilliant. In a sick way. If I tried to defend myself publicly, I would look defensive and erratic. If I stayed silent, the rumor solidified. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. The city below was gray and busy. Thousands of people rushing to jobs where their parents didn't try to monetize their existence. I felt a profound, aching loneliness. I had built a life here, a career, a mortgage, a routine, but one Facebook post from my aunt made me feel like the scared little girl hiding in the guest room again. The mail arrived at noon. I usually ignored the physical mail, sorting through it once a week over the trash can. But today a thick, cream-colored envelope caught my eye. It looked official. It looked expensive. The return address was simple. Hearthstone Ridge Holdings, LLC. My stomach dropped. I ripped it open. Inside was a single sheet of heavy bond paper. The letterhead was embossed. It looked like something a legitimate law firm or investment bank would send. But the logo was generic, a stylized mountain peak that looked like clip art. Dear Ms. Green, reference number HG-1990-COLL-AUTH. Thank you for your continued cooperation regarding the asset restructuring for the properties located at Maple Hollow. This letter serves to confirm that your status as a silent guarantor has been noted in our internal ledgers, pending final wet signatures. As discussed, no immediate action is required on your part. We appreciate your willingness to facilitate the bridge liquidity required for the upcoming fiscal quarter. Please retain this document for your records. Sincerely, the managing partners. I read it twice, then a third time. Continued cooperation. Silent guarantor. As discussed, the language was slippery. It didn't ask me to do anything. It didn't demand money. It was written as if the agreement were already a done deal, a foregone conclusion. It was designed to look boring. It was designed to be filed away and forgotten. But the reference number made my blood freeze. HG-1990. My initials, my birth year. They weren't asking me to join Hearthstone Ridge. They were creating a paper trail that suggested I was already in it. I grabbed my keys. I didn't bother calling ahead. I drove straight to Briar Glen. Alden Pike's office looked exactly as it had 2 days ago. Cluttered, smelling of old coffee and toner. He looked up when I burst in, his eyebrows raising slightly over the rim of his glasses. I didn't think I would see you until we filed the affidavit. He said. I slammed the letter onto his desk. They sent me this. I said. Alden picked up the paper. He adjusted his glasses. He read it slowly, his expression shifting from curiosity to a flat, grim line. He hummed, a low sound in his throat. "This is clever," he said. "Evil, but clever." "What does it mean?" I asked, pacing the small width of the office. "It says continued cooperation." "I haven't cooperated with anything." "Exactly," Alden said. He tapped the paper. "This is what we call a presumption letter. In contract disputes, silence can sometimes be argued as acquiescence. If they send you a letter confirming an agreement, and you don't reject it, they can later argue in court that you received the confirmation and raised no objections." He looked up at me. "They are building a file. Hannah, if a bank auditor asks, 'Where is the proof Ms. Green is involved?' they pull this out. Look, we sent her a confirmation letter. She kept it. She didn't dispute it. It implies a verbal contract existed, but I never signed anything," I shouted. Alden sighed. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Fraud isn't always about forging a signature," he said. "Sometimes it is about creating enough smoke that the bank assumes there is a fire. They are banking on you being too polite, or too confused, or too scared to make a formal noise. They want you to hold this letter and do nothing." He handed it back to me. "This changes things. We aren't just protecting your credit anymore. We are stopping a crime in progress." I left his office with a new instruction. Confront them. Not over email, not over the phone. I needed to go there, put the letter on the table, and demand the truth before I unleashed the legal hounds. I needed to give them one final chance to confess before I turned them into defendants. I drove to Maple Hollow. The drive felt different this time. On Thanksgiving, I had been anxious. Now, I was cold. I felt like a coroner on the way to a crime scene. When I pulled into the driveway, my father's car was there, alongside my mother's SUV, and Justin's car. The whole triumvirate was assembled. I let myself in. I didn't knock. It was my childhood home, but it felt like entering a hostile embassy. They were in the living room. The TV was on, playing a cable news channel at low volume. My father was in his recliner, a glass of scotch in his hand, even though it was 2 p.m. My mother was on the sofa, scrolling through her iPad. Justin was standing by the fireplace, looking at his phone. They all froze when I walked in. "Hannah?" my mother said, her voice wavering between hope and annoyance. "We didn't know you were coming." I didn't say hello. I walked to the coffee table and dropped the Hearthstone Ridge letter on top of a stack of Architectural Digest magazines. "Explain this," I said. My father looked at the letter. He didn't pick it up. He took a sip of his scotch, his eyes narrowing. "You are being very aggressive lately." "Hannah," he said, "it is unbecoming." I pointed at the letter. "It says I am a silent guarantor. It has my birth year and the reference number." "Who wrote this?" Justin looked at the letter, then at the floor. He shifted his weight, looking like he wanted to vanish into the drywall. My mother looked at my father. "Roger," she whispered. My father set his glass down. He stood up. He was a tall man, and he used his height to intimidate. He walked toward me, a benevolent, disappointed smile plastered on his face. "Hannah, Hannah, Hannah," he said, shaking his head. "You are reading too much into standard business correspondence." "Standard business?" I repeated. "Since when am I in business with you?" "Since the day you were born," he roared. The sudden volume made me flinch, but I held my ground. "We fed you," he shouted, his face turning red. "We clothed you. We paid for that liberal arts degree you barely use. We housed you when you had your little breakdown. You think that was free? You think life is free?" He was pivoting. Alden had warned me about this. When caught on the facts, they switched to emotions. "I am not talking about my childhood." "Dad," I said, my voice steady, "I am talking about Hearthstone Ridge. What is it?" My mother stood up. She looked exhausted. The facade of the perfect hostess was gone, leaving behind a terrified woman. "It is the house." "Hannah," she said quietly. Roger turned on her. "Kathy, shut up." "No, Roger," she cried. "She knows. She already knows. She looked at me, tears spilling over. Your father's firm. The consulting contracts dried up 2 years ago. We have been living on credit. The credit cards are maxed. The retirement accounts are drained. She gestured helplessly around the room, at the expensive furniture, the art, the stage sets of their success. The bank is going to call the note on the house, she sobbed. We have a balloon payment due in January. We can't make it. Hearthstone Ridge. It was a way to refinance, to pull equity out of the commercial property and save the house. I looked at her. The reality of it hit me. They weren't rich. They were broke. They were drowning. And they were trying to use my body as a flotation device. So you need a loan. I said, we need a guarantor. My father corrected, his voice sharp. We have the assets. The properties are worth millions. But the bank is being difficult about cash flow. They want a cosigner with high liquidity and a low debt-to-income ratio. Me? I said, you. He said, you have nothing. No kids, no husband. You sit in that apartment hoarding your salary. It is selfish. Hannah, after all we sacrificed to get you to this point, you owe us this. It is just a signature. It buys us 6 months to turn things around. It is fraud. I said, you are asking me to take on debt for a business I don't own, for a house I don't live in. I own you. He spat. I am your father. He took a step closer, looming over me. And don't think you can just walk away, he hissed. I have proof. Proof of what? I asked. Proof that you agreed. He said, back when you were living here. I have emails. I have voice memos. You told me to handle your finances. You gave me verbal power of attorney. I never did that. I said, my father smiled, and it was a cold reptilian thing. I have the files. Hannah, and if you try to blow this up, I will release them. I will show the world, and your employer, just how unstable you really are. I will tell them you begged me to take over because you couldn't handle your own life. Who are they going to believe? The successful consultant? Or the girl who spent 3 months crying on the floor? I looked at him, and I realized he wasn't bluffing. He would burn my reputation to save his own skin. I looked at Justin. And you? I asked. What is your part in this? Justin looked up. He looked sick. I set up the LLC, he whispered. Justin! My father warned. I did it! Justin shouted, his voice cracking. He looked at me. Hannah, I had to. He leveraged me too. He helped me with the down payment on my firm's office. He said if I didn't set up the structure, he would call in the loan. So you built the trap. I said, I didn't know he was going to use you. Justin pleaded. He said he had an investor lined up. I didn't know the investor was you until Thanksgiving. He walked over to the TV console and picked up a flash drive. He held it in his hand, hesitating. And the video. I said, the Thanksgiving video. Justin winced. Yeah, he said. That wasn't for Facebook. Explain. I commanded, Dad wanted footage. Justin said quietly. He wanted a video of you sitting at the table, smiling, toasting. He was going to edit it. Edit it how? He was going to voice over it, Justin admitted, or splice in audio. Make it look like a board meeting. Make it look like you were celebrating the closing of the deal. To the partnership. To the future. I felt the blood drain from my face. The chair. The missing seat. It wasn't just to make me feel small. It was to make me stand up. To make me engage. To make me look at the camera. They wanted me to beg for the seat so that when I finally sat down, my relief would look like agreement. I looked at the 3 of them. My mother, weeping on the couch. My brother, the coward. My father, the architect of my ruin. You are monsters, I said. My father laughed. We are survivors. Hannah, and you are going to help us survive, because if you don't, I will ruin you. I turned around. I walked to the door. You walk out that door, and I send the emails to your boss. My father shouted after me. I will tell them you are a liability. I opened the door. I looked back at him one last time. "Do it," I said. I closed the door. I didn't go back to the city immediately. I went to Jessa's house. She lived in a suburb halfway between Maple Hollow and the city. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. We went to her home office. It was a stark contrast to my parents' house. It was clean, functional, and honest. "Sit," Jessa said. She opened a bottle of wine and poured 2 glasses. Then she opened her laptop. I told her everything: the letter, the house, the threat, the video. Jessa didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She typed, "Okay," she said. "We are building a war room." She pulled up a spreadsheet. Column A, dates. Column B, events. Column C, evidence. We started filling it in. November 22nd. Credit inquiry from Hearthstone Ridge. November 23rd. Thanksgiving dinner. Video recording attempts. November 24th. Marla Denton, witness statement regarding signature phone call. November 27th. Receipt of presumption letter. November 27th. Verbal confession from Justin Green regarding LLC creation. November 27th. Threat of extortion from Roger Green. It looked clinical on the screen. It looked manageable. "It is a pattern," Jessa said, pointing at the screen. "Look at the timeline. They ramped up the pressure exactly when the balloon payment deadline approached. This isn't emotional. Hannah, it is logistical. They are desperate and dangerous." I added, "He threatened my job." Jessa nodded. "Which means we have to strike first. You can't just play defense. You have to nuke the bridge." She turned the laptop toward me. "Alden Pike said to send a letter." I said. Jessa shook her head. "Not just a letter, a cannon blast." We spent the next 3 hours drafting. We didn't just write to my parents. We wrote to everyone. We drafted a formal cease and desist to Roger and Catherine Green. We drafted a notice of disputed identity to Hearthstone Ridge Holdings, care of the registered agent, which Jessa found was a P.O. box in a strip mall. We drafted a letter to the fraud department of the bank listed on the credit inquiry, and then Jessa looked at me. "You need to tell your boss," she said. I froze. "No, I can't bring this into work. If your father is threatening to call them." "You have to get ahead of it," Jessa insisted. "You go to HR tomorrow. You tell them you are in a legal dispute with a family member involving identity theft, and that they may attempt to contact the company to harass you. You frame it as a security issue." It felt humiliating to admit that my own father was a threat. "It is better than them getting a call from a concerned parent saying you are on drugs," Jessa said. "Control the narrative." I looked at the spreadsheet. I looked at the letters. I realized Jessa was right. I had been trying to solve this like a daughter, hoping for an apology, hoping for a change of heart. But I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a target. I picked up my phone. I called Alden Pike's voicemail. "Alden," I said, "it is Hannah. I am authorizing the full package. Send the cease and desist. File the police report for the credit inquiry, and prepare a draft for a restraining order if they come near my apartment. I am done negotiating." I hung up. Jessa handed me the wine glass. "To the partnership?" she asked, a dark irony in her voice. I clinked my glass against hers. "To the dissolution." I said. The next morning, I woke up with a headache, but it was the headache of action, not suppression. I went to work. I spoke to HR. It was the hardest meeting of my life, sitting in a glass-walled office and explaining that my father might try to sabotage my career. The HR director was kind, professional, and took notes. She flagged my file. She warned the receptionist. I felt exposed, but I also felt armored. At noon, I received a text from Justin. "Dad is freaking out. He got a notification from the bank that the loan application was flagged for fraud. He knows it was you." I didn't reply. Then, a second text. "He's calling a family meeting. Thursday, Candlepine Inn. He says if you don't come, he releases the files. He says he wants to settle this like adults." I stared at the phone. The Candlepine Inn. It was a neutral ground, a banquet hall, a public place. He wanted an audience. He wanted a stage. He thought he could bully me into submission if he surrounded me with witnesses. He thought the threat of the files, whatever edited garbage he had, would force me to sign. I typed a reply. Time? Justin replied instantly. 7 p.m. Please. Hannah, just come and listen. Bring a lawyer if you want. Just don't let him burn the house down. I put the phone down. I wasn't going to go there to listen. I wasn't going to go there to sign. I was going to go there to close the book. I called Alden. Free your schedule for Thursday night. I said, we are going to a party. The Candle Pine Inn was the kind of establishment that relied heavily on gold-painted trim and dim lighting to disguise the fact that the carpet smelled faintly of chlorine and old cigarettes. It was the premier venue in Briar Glen for wedding receptions on a budget, and apparently, for ambush family therapy sessions. My father had rented the Cypress Room, a windowless box at the back of the hallway, far away from the main restaurant where unsuspecting diners were enjoying their pot roast. He had framed this meeting as a reconciliation, a laying down of arms. The email subject line had been, Healing the Divide. I knew better. This wasn't a peace treaty, it was a court-martial. I stood in the parking lot, the gravel crunching under my boots. The air was thick with sleet, the kind that stung your face and blurred your vision. You don't have to go in there alone, Jessa said. She was sitting in the driver's seat of her car, the engine running to keep the heat on. I can come in. I can be the bad guy. No, I said, adjusting the collar of my coat. If you go in, they will say I am being manipulated by my friends. They will say I am too weak to speak for myself. I need them to see me. I looked over at the sedan parked 2 spaces down. Alden Pike sat behind the wheel, reading a paperback novel by the dashboard light. He wasn't coming into the room immediately. That was the strategy. If I brought a lawyer in the first 5 minutes, my father would clam up and play the victim. I needed them to talk. I needed them to commit to their lie in front of witnesses before I brought the hammer down. I am going in, I said. Jessa nodded. We are right here. If you text red, Alden goes in. If you text black, I call the police. I turned and walked toward the entrance. Inside, the Cypress Room was set up like a tribunal. My father had pushed 3 banquet tables together to form a long rectangle. At the head sat my parents. Flanking them were the jurors they had handpicked for this performance. Aunt Linda, Cousin Mike, Sarah, and my mother's older sister, Aunt Beatrice, who had driven down from the city and was known for her strict adherence to family loyalty above all else. And there was Justin, sitting at the far end, looking like a man waiting for a firing squad. When I walked in, the room went silent. My mother stood up. She was wearing a soft blue sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. It was her vulnerable mother costume. Hannah, she said, her voice trembling with manufactured relief. You came. We were so worried you wouldn't show. I didn't hug her. I didn't smile. I walked to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table from my father and placed my leather portfolio on the surface. I am here to listen. I said, You said you wanted to settle this. My father cleared his throat. He looked composed, presidential. He had a thick manila folder in front of him. We do. Hannah, he said, we want to clear the air. There has been so much misunderstanding, so much unnecessary hostility. He gestured to the room. We invited the family because we have nothing to hide. We want everyone to understand the truth of the situation. We want to bring you back into the fold. Hannah, but we can't do that if you insist on this fantasy that we are trying to harm you. He opened the folder. I saw the papers inside. They were photocopies. You sent me a letter. Dad, I said, from Hearthstone Ridge. You claimed I was a silent guarantor. I am asking you, in front of everyone, to explain why my birth year is on a loan reference number I never signed for. My father sighed. He looked at Aunt Beatrice. He looked at Cousin Mike. He gave them a look of long-suffering patience. See? He said softly. She is fixated on the technicalities. She doesn't remember the agreement. He pulled a sheet of paper from the folder and slid it across the table. This is an email. Hannah, he said, from 3 years ago, during your recovery. I looked at the paper. It was a printout of an email from my personal account. Subject, Please help date. October 14th, Dad. I can't do this anymore. The pressure is too much. I need you to take over. Handle everything. I just want to sleep. Whatever you think is best with the accounts. Just do it. I trust you. The room was quiet. Aunt Linda let out a small, sympathetic gasp. You gave me broad authority. Hannah, my father said gently, you were in a very dark place. You asked me to shield you from the financial stress. We set up the structure then. Hearthstone Ridge was designed to protect your future assets. You agreed to be the guarantor because you had no income at the time, and we were using our credit to support you. Now that you have income, the bank simply recognized the pre-existing arrangement. I stared at the email. It was real. I remembered writing it, but I remembered writing it about my medical bills and my car insurance. I had been drowning in logistics while battling severe depression. I had asked him to handle my monthly bills, but looking at the paper on the table, something was wrong. The header was cropped. The bottom of the email, where the signature block should be, was cut off, and the font of the body text looked slightly pixelated compared to the header. I looked closer. The sentence, "Whatever you think is best with the accounts," was in a slightly different shade of black than the rest of the text. You edited this, I said. My father's face didn't move. Excuse me? You changed the text, I said, my voice rising. I asked you to handle my car insurance. I never said accounts. You pasted that in. Hannah. My mother said, stepping in. Honey, stop. You are doing it again. Doing what? I asked. Reimagining things, she said sadly. She turned to the corner of the room. I hadn't noticed him in the shadows near the service door. Doctor, Laird, please, doctor. Evan Laird stepped into the light. He wasn't wearing his white coat, but he wore the authority of it like a second skin. He walked to the table and placed a hand on the back of an empty chair. Hello. Hannah, he said softly. My blood ran cold. You brought my doctor? I am here as a friend of the family, he corrected. But, Hannah, your parents are very concerned. We all are. He looked at the relatives. Paranoia is a very common defense mechanism during periods of high stress. Doctor, Laird explained to the room, as if he were giving a lecture, when the mind is overwhelmed, it rewrites history to protect the ego. Hannah feels attacked, so she invents a conspiracy. She genuinely believes she didn't agree to this. He looked at me with pity. Hannah, nobody is forging documents. You are just misremembering the scope of the help you asked for. It was a masterstroke. They weren't calling me a liar. They were calling me a patient. They were invalidating my reality by using my medical history as a weapon. I looked around the room. Aunt Beatrice was nodding slowly. Cousin Mike looked relieved that there was a medical explanation for the ugliness. I felt the room tilting. For a second. Just a second. I doubted myself. Did I say that? Was I that gone? Then I touched the cool leather of my portfolio. Inside were the credit alerts, the dates, the facts. Facts did not hallucinate. I stood up. I am not a patient. I said clearly, I am a project manager. And I have questions. I looked at my father. If I agreed to this 3 years ago, why did you run a credit check last week? My father blinked. It was a renewal, he said smoothly. Standard procedure. Wrong. I said, a renewal is a soft pull on an existing account. This was a hard inquiry for a new line of credit. Why did you need a new line of credit if the structure was already in place? We expanded the holding, he said. What is the principal amount? I asked. It varies, he said. Give me a number. Dad, I demanded. If I am the guarantor, surely I am allowed to know the number. Is it 50,000? 500,000? He hesitated. 750,000, he muttered. The room gasped. Aunt Linda put her hand over her mouth. $750,000, I repeated. And who is the beneficiary of the loan? Is it me? It is the family trust, my mother interjected. It is for everyone. Show me the trust documents, I said. Show me where my name is listed as a beneficiary. My father's jaw tightened. We don't have the full binder here. This isn't a legal deposition. Hannah, it feels like one, I said. You have an edited email and a doctor to diagnose me, but you don't have the trust documents. I turned to Justin. Justin, I said, you set up the LLC. Who is the beneficiary? Justin looked at our father. My father's eyes were two burning coals of warning. Justin? I pressed. Justin opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was paralyzed. The door to the banquet room opened. It wasn't Alden. It wasn't a waiter. It was Marla Denton. She was wearing a heavy wool coat and clutching a handbag. She looked out of place in the banquet hall, like a truthful rock in a garden of plastic flowers. Everyone turned. Who invited her? My mother hissed. I did, Justin whispered. My father whipped his head around to stare at his son. You did what? I texted her, Justin said, his voice shaking. I told her where we were. Marla walked into the room. She didn't look at my parents. She looked at the relatives. She looked at Aunt Beatrice. I am sorry to crash the party, Marla said, her voice raspy but clear. But I live across the street. I have lived there for 20 years. I have seen Hannah grow up, and I have heard a lot of things through the walls. She walked to the table. Roger, she said, looking my father in the eye. I heard you on the phone 2 weeks ago, on your patio. My father stood up. Marla, leave. This is a private family matter. You made it public when you started shouting about fraud in the backyard. Marla said. She turned to the group. He was talking to a banker. She said, I heard him say, I will get the signature. Don't worry about the girl. I will make it look clean. The silence in the room was absolute. He said he would make it look clean. Marla repeated, and he said, if Hannah fought back, he would use her medical history to discredit her. He said, who will they believe? The successful father or the crazy daughter? She looked at Dr. Laird. Is that the medical history you are using right now? Doctor? Doctor. Laird stepped back, his face draining of color. I was not aware of any coercion. I was simply asked to assess. I stepped forward. Thank you. Marla, I said. I looked at my father. His presidential composure was cracking. A vein was throbbing in his temple. Marla is confused, he sputtered. She is an old woman. She hears things. She hates us because we have a nicer lawn. Stop it. Dad, I said. I reached into my portfolio and pulled out a single sheet of paper. This is a confirmation from the credit bureau. I said, as of yesterday morning, my credit is frozen. All 3 bureaus. Check systems is locked. I slammed the paper onto the table. The bank can't process the loan. Dad, even if you forge my signature, even if you use your edited emails, the file is locked. The underwriters will get a fraud alert the moment they try to run the final approval. My father's face went gray. You froze it? He whispered. Yes, but the deadline, he said, his voice sounding suddenly thin and reedy. The balloon payment is Tuesday. If the funding doesn't clear, we lose the house. My mother finished. Her voice was a wail. She looked at me, her eyes wide with horror. You killed us, she whispered. You just killed us. Hannah, how could you? I didn't kill you. I said, I stopped you from drowning me to save yourselves. My mother stood up. She rushed around the table. She didn't attack me. She grabbed my hands. Hannah, please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. We can fix this. We can undo the freeze, just for 24 hours. Just let the loan clear, and then we will pay it back. I promise. She squeezed my hands. Look, she said, you want your seat? You can have it. We will treat you with respect. We will give you the big room when you visit. We will tell everyone how you saved the family. You will be the hero. Hannah, just unlock the file. I looked at her hands gripping mine. They were the same hands that had removed my plate at Thanksgiving. They were the hands that had typed texts calling me dramatic. You are offering me a seat? I asked. Yes, she cried. The head of the table. Anything you want. I pulled my hands away. The seat isn't yours to give. Mom, I said. And neither is my credit score. You aren't sorry you did it. You are sorry the transaction failed. My father slammed his fist onto the table. The water glasses jumped. "You ungrateful little brat!" he screamed. The mask was gone. The charm was gone. There was only the rage of a narcissist denied his supply. "I built everything," he roared. "I carried you. And now you are going to let the bank take my house? My legacy?" He pointed a shaking finger at me. "I will ruin you. Hannah, I swear it. I will release those files. I will tell your boss you are a thief. I will tell everyone you stole from us. Do it," Justin said. The voice came from the end of the table. We all turned. Justin was standing up. He looked sick, but he was standing. "Do it, Dad," Justin said. "Release the files, because I have the originals." My father froze. "What?" "I have the backup," Justin said. "From the old desktop. I copied the hard drive before you wiped it last year." Justin looked at me. "I saw the metadata. Hannah, I saw the edits. I saw him taking your old emails and splicing the text. I didn't say anything because I was scared. I didn't want him to come after me." He looked at the relatives. "Dad has been using Hannah's identity for years," Justin said to the room. "He opened a utility account in her name 5 years ago. He used her social to get a burner phone. It is all on the drive." Aunt Beatrice stood up. She picked up her purse. "Roger," she said, her voice cold as ice. "I think we are done here." "Beatrice, wait," my mother cried. "Don't," Aunt Beatrice said. She looked at me. "Hannah, do you need a ride?" "I have my own car," I said. The room was dissolving. The jury was walking out. Doctor. Laird had already slipped out the service door, realizing his medical license was in jeopardy if he stayed. My father stood alone at the center of the table, the folder of forged documents looking like trash in front of him. He looked at me with a hatred so pure it felt like radiant heat. "You think you won?" he hissed. "You think this is over? You are nothing without us. You are a lonely, bitter woman with a camping stool. Everyone will know. I will tell them you are jealous. I will tell them you are unstable." "Go ahead," I said. I picked up my portfolio. "Tell them whatever you want, Dad, but tell them from a rented apartment, because this house of cards is closed." I turned and walked toward the exit. "Hannah!" my mother screamed. She was on her knees now, sobbing into the carpet. "Don't leave us!" I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I pushed open the double doors of the Cypress room and stepped into the hallway. Alden Pike was standing there, leaning against the wall. He had heard the screaming. "Do we need the police?" he asked. "No." I said, "The jury has reached a verdict." I walked out of the Candlepine Inn. The sleet had stopped. The air was cold and clean. Marla Denton was waiting by my car. Jessa was standing next to her. They didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just stood there, flanked by the reality of the night. Marla handed me a tissue. "You did good, kid," she said. I took the tissue. I didn't cry. I felt light. It was a strange, terrifying lightness. The lack of gravity that comes when you cut the ropes that have been holding you down your entire life. I looked back at the hotel. I could see the silhouette of my father through the glass doors, arguing with Justin. It was over. The silence that had allowed the abuse to fester was broken. I got into my car. "Where to?" Jessa asked, leaning into the window. "Home," I said. "My real home." I started the engine. The dashboard glowed, steady and bright. But as I pulled out of the lot, I knew it wasn't completely over. A narcissist without a supply is a dangerous thing. He had one card left to play, the public smear. He had threatened to go to my employer. He had threatened to rewrite my history. Let him try. I had the truth. I had the files. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for permission to sit down. I was standing on my own ground. The email I sent to my extended family on Monday morning was not a manifesto. It was not a tear-stained diary entry or a plea for sympathy. It was a cold, hard block of text, stripped of adjectives and devoid of emotion. I sat at my kitchen table, the early morning light filtering through the blinds, and read it one last time before I added the recipients. 2. The Green Family Extended Circle. From Hannah Green. Subject: Clarification regarding recent financial inquiries. Dear family, In light of recent discussions and social media posts regarding my standing with my parents, I am writing to provide factual clarity. I have not authorized, signed, or agreed to any financial loans, guarantorships, or property liens involving Hearthstone Ridge Holdings. Any document suggesting otherwise is currently under legal review for authenticity. Attached is a redacted copy of the credit freeze confirmation initiated on November 28th, as well as the reference number for the fraud alert filed with the credit bureaus. If you have been told that I am withholding support or abandoning family obligations, please understand that I am simply protecting my identity from unauthorized use. Any further questions regarding this matter can be directed to my attorney. Alden Pike. Regards, Hannah. I took a breath that rattled in my chest and pressed send. It felt like I was detonating a bomb in a library. For 30 years, the rule of the Green family had been silence. We didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about Dad's temper. We certainly didn't talk about the fact that our success was a facade held together by debt and denial. By sending that email, I wasn't just defending myself. I was breaking the cardinal law. I was letting the outside world in. The fallout was immediate, but not from the family. It came from the one place I thought was safe. 2 days later, on a Wednesday, I was called into the Human Resources office at Northbridge Systems Group. My manager, David, met me at the door. He looked uncomfortable. He wouldn't meet my eyes. HR Director Susan Miller was sitting behind her desk. She was a woman of steel gray hair and absolute precision. On her desk was a printed email. "Sit down." "Hannah," she said. I sat. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew what this was. My father had promised to ruin me. He had promised to call my employer and tell them I was unstable, a liability, a thief. "We received a communication this morning," Susan said, picking up the paper. "It was sent to the General Ethics inbox. The sender claimed to be a concerned party regarding your fiduciary reliability." She paused, looking at me over her glasses. "It alleges that you are currently under investigation for family-related fraud and that you have a history of untreated mental instability that puts our client data at risk." The room spun. He had actually done it. He had tried to torch my career, the one thing I had built entirely on my own, just to punish me for saying no. I took a steadying breath. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I remembered Alden Pike's advice. Facts do not hallucinate. "Susan," I said, keeping my voice level, "that email is a retaliatory action from a family member with whom I am currently in a legal dispute regarding identity theft. I have a pending police report and a cease and desist order that was issued last week." I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I had started carrying everywhere. I slid the police report and the letter from Alden Pike across the desk. "I anticipated this might happen." I said, "I am sorry it has reached your desk. But the allegations are false, and they are designed to coerce me into signing a loan document." Susan picked up the police report. She read it silently. David shifted in his chair, looking from me to the paper. After a long minute, Susan set the paper down. She looked at the email on her desk, the one my father, or perhaps my mother, had typed out in a rage. She picked up the email and dropped it into the shredder bin by her knee. "Thank you for the context. Hannah," she said, "Northbridge does not act on anonymous, malicious tips, especially when an employee has documented proof of harassment." She leaned forward. "However, if you need time off to handle this, court matters, or security, let David know. We can route your projects for a week. You are a high-value asset to this team. Hannah, we protect our assets." I felt a lump form in my throat, hot and painful. I had expected judgment. I had expected to be treated like a risk. Instead, I was being treated like a professional. "Thank you, Susan," I said. "I would like to keep working. Work is the only normal thing I have right now." When I walked out of that office, I realized something profound. My parents' power over me relied entirely on my isolation. They needed me to believe that they were the only ones who would ever love me, the only ones who would ever understand me. But the world was full of rational people who operated on facts, not manipulation. My parents were small. Their threats were small. I called Alden Pike from the parking lot. They tried the work angle. I said, "It failed." "Good," Alden said. His voice was raspy. He sounded like he was eating a sandwich. "Now we go on the offensive. I am filing a demand for production of documents. We are sending it to Hearthstone Ridge, to your father, and to the bank. We are asking for every piece of paper with your name on it going back 5 years. Will they give it to us?" I asked. "No," Alden said. "They will stall. They will claim privilege. They will lose files. But the demand itself triggers a legal hold. If they destroy anything now, it is a felony. We are freezing them in place. Hannah, we are making it so expensive and dangerous for them to keep lying that the truth becomes the cheaper option." I drove home that evening feeling a strange sense of calm. The worst had happened. They had attacked my reputation, and I was still standing. That night, my phone rang at 11 o'clock. I looked at the screen. Mom, I shouldn't have answered. Alden would have told me not to answer. Jessa would have snatched the phone from my hand. But I was still a daughter, and the habit of availability is a hard one to break. I picked up. "Hello? Hannah?" Her voice was small. It sounded like it was coming from inside a closet. It lacked the theatricality she usually projected. There were no tears, no wailing, just a hollow, tinny whisper. "He is asleep," she said. I didn't say anything. I sat on my couch, the city lights casting long shadows across my living room floor. "He is so angry." "Hannah," she said, "he smashed the laptop today. The one Justin backed up. He threw it against the fireplace. I am sorry." "Mom," I said, "but I can't fix his anger." "I know," she said. There was a long silence. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the house I grew up in. I could picture her standing in the kitchen, perhaps looking at the spot where the camping stool had sat. "You know the phrase?" she asked suddenly. "No seat for disappointments?" I closed my eyes. "Yes, Mom, I know the phrase. It wasn't a joke," she whispered. I waited. "He practiced it," she said. Her voice broke, then steadied. 2 days before Thanksgiving, he stood in front of the hallway mirror. He tried it with a laugh. He tried it with a scowl. He asked me which one sounded more authoritative. My stomach turned. It wasn't just cruelty. It was rehearsed cruelty. It was a performance designed for maximum impact. "Why?" "Mom," I asked, "why would you let him do that?" "Because if you are confident, you don't need us," she said. The truth spilled out of her like spilled wine, staining everything. He said if you felt small, you would want to please us. You would want to earn your way back in. And if you wanted to earn your way back in, you would sign the papers. She took a ragged breath. "It is how he controls everyone. Hannah, he makes us feel like we are lucky to even be in the room. And you helped him," I said. "You filmed it. I have to live here," she said. It was the saddest sentence I had ever heard. "I don't have a camping stool. Hannah, I don't have anywhere else to sit." She hung up. I sat in the dark for a long time. I realized then that my mother wasn't just an accomplice. She was a hostage who had fallen in love with her cage. She had chosen her survival strategy, and it was compliance. I had chosen mine, and it was exit. We couldn't save each other. The next day, Justin texted me. "Meet me. Briar Glen Diner, noon, alone." I went. The diner was a chrome and neon relic that smelled of burnt coffee and bacon grease. It was neutral ground, far enough from the country club crowd that my father wouldn't be caught dead there. Justin was sitting in a booth in the back. He looked terrible. He hadn't shaved in 3 days, and there were dark circles under his eyes that looked like bruises. He was nursing a black coffee. I slid into the booth opposite him. He didn't say hello. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver flash drive. He placed it on the Formica table. "Here," he said. "What is this?" I asked. Though I knew, "It is everything," he said. "The backups. I made a copy before he smashed the laptop." He looked out the window at the parking lot. "There are drafts of the letters he sent to the bank pretending to be you." Justin said tonelessly. There are the audio files he edited. There's a spreadsheet called Family Leverage, where he tracked everything. Who owed him what? Which secrets he could use against Aunt Linda? Which medical records he could use against you? I stared at the silver drive. It was so small, yet it contained the architecture of our family's dysfunction. Why are you giving me this? I asked. You know this incriminates you too. Justin, you set up the LLC. I know, he said. He looked at me then. His eyes were red. I am done. Hannah, I broke up with Sarah yesterday. She asked why I wouldn't just side with Dad, why I wouldn't just keep the peace. And I realized, I don't want peace. I want to sleep at night. He pushed the drive closer to me. Alden can use this to get you out. Justin said, it proves the fraud. It proves the coercion. It clears your credit. And what happens to you? I asked. Justin shrugged. I will probably lose my license. Dad will definitely cut me out of the will. Not that there is anything left to inherit. I will have to start over. He let out a short, dry laugh. Maybe I will buy a camping stool, he said. I reached out and took the drive. It was cold metal in my palm. Thank you. Justin. He stood up. He didn't wait for a hug. He threw a $5 bill on the table for his coffee. Don't thank me, he said. I watched them take your chair. I watched them do it. And I said nothing. I am not a hero. Hannah. I am just the guy who cleaned up the mess after the house already burned down. He walked out of the diner, shoulders hunched against the wind. I had the evidence. I had the support of my job. I had the law on my side. There was only one thing left to do. I had to go back to the house. Alden advised against it. Jessa offered to go with me, but I needed to do this alone. I needed to walk into that house one last time, not as a victim, not as a litigant, but as a ghost haunting a life I used to live. I drove to Maple Hollow on Saturday afternoon. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with unshed snow. The house looked pristine from the street, the windows glowing with warm light. A perfect lie of domestic bliss. I had a key. I hadn't returned it yet. I unlocked the front door and stepped in. The house was quiet. The ring lights were gone. The tripod was gone. It was just a house. My parents were in the living room. They must have heard the door, because they both appeared in the archway. My father looked older, his face slack and gray. My mother looked terrified. You? My father said. His voice was a growl. You have some nerve coming here. I am just here for my things. I said, I had a box in the attic, yearbooks, some college diplomas, a few winter coats. Get them and get out, he said. You are trespassing. I walked past them. I went up the stairs, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood. I went to the attic, found my box, and carried it down. It was heavy, but I didn't struggle. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I didn't go straight to the door. I walked into the dining room. The table was set, not for a party, just for two placemats, 2 chairs. The empty space where I had sat on my stool was glaring. My parents followed me. What are you doing? My mother asked, her voice trembling. I put the box down. I carried a canvas tote bag on my shoulder. I reached into it and pulled out a chair. It wasn't the camping stool. It was a simple, black metal folding chair I had bought at an office supply store. I unfolded it. Clack. I placed it at the table, right where my spot used to be. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a name card. It was white cardstock, folded into a tent. It was blank. I set it on the chair. What is this? My father demanded. Is this another stunt? Are you mocking us? No, I said. I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the fear behind his eyes, the desperate need to control the narrative because without it, he was just a man who had spent money he didn't earn. I am leaving this here. I said, why? My mother whispered. Because you always said there was no seat for disappointments. I said, and you were right. I pointed to the empty blank chair. This is the last seat you get in my life. I said, it is empty. It will always be empty. I am not coming back for Christmas. I am not coming back for birthdays. I am not coming back to sign your loans. You can talk to this chair. You can blame this chair. You can tell this chair how ungrateful I am, but I won't be in it." My father's face turned that dangerous shade of purple. He stepped forward, his fists clenched. "You ungrateful, selfish bitch," he shouted. He was winding up. He wanted me to scream back. He wanted a fight. He wanted noise to drown out the truth. I didn't yell. I didn't step back. I just watched him. I watched him like I was watching a storm on the news. Dangerous, yes, but far away. "Get out of my house," he roared. "I will call the police. I will tell them you attacked us." I picked up my box of yearbooks. "The police have my number." "Dad," I said softly, "and they have Justin's flash drive." He froze. The air went out of him. He looked at my mother, then back at me. "He gave it to you?" he whispered. "He is done lying," I said, "and so am I." I turned and walked to the door. My father didn't follow. He stood in the dining room, staring at the blank chair, realizing that for the first time in his life, he couldn't bully the silence into submission. I stepped out into the cold air. Marla Denton was there. She was standing at the edge of her lawn, wrapped in a thick scarf, pretending to check her mailbox again, but she wasn't checking mail. She was standing guard. She saw me carrying the box. She saw the look on my face, not victory, but the exhaustion of survival. She walked across the street. She didn't say a word. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. She pressed it into my hand. "What is this?" I asked. "Insurance," she said. I opened it. It was a small notepad. Pages torn out and stapled together. On each page was a date, a time, and a transcription. November 14th, 2 p.m. Roger on phone. "If the girl doesn't sign, we forge it. She's too weak to notice." November 20th, 4:30 p.m. Roger to Catherine. "Get the camera ready. We need to make her look crazy." At the bottom of the last page, Marla had written, "I, Marla Denton, certify that I heard these statements clearly. Signed, Marla Denton." I looked up at her. My eyes filled with tears. Real tears. Not the frustrated anger of the last week. "Marla." I said, "You didn't have to do this. You needed a witness," she said. She patted my gloved hand. "Families like that. They rely on there being no witnesses. They rely on the doors being closed." I opened the window. She looked at the house. "You go on now. Hannah, you have a life to live. Don't look back. There is nothing there but dry rot." I hugged her. It was a fierce, desperate hug. "Thank you," I whispered. I got into my car. I put the box in the passenger seat. I put Marla's notes in my purse, next to Justin's flash drive, next to the letter from Alden Pike. I started the engine. I looked at the house one last time. I could see the dining room window. I could see the silhouette of the folding chair I had left behind. A black mark against the gold light. A void where a victim used to be. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. There was no triumphant music. The sky didn't clear. The financial mess was still there. I had months of legal wrangling ahead of me. Affidavits to file, credit reports to scrub. My brother was broken. My parents were enemies. My past was a minefield. But as I merged onto the highway, watching the exit for Maple Hollow disappear behind me, I felt the seat underneath me. It was the driver's seat. It was adjustable. It was heated. And most importantly, I had paid for it myself. I turned on the radio. A classic rock station was playing. I turned it up. The story my parents had written for me, the story of the fragile, unstable, ungrateful daughter, was finished. I had closed the book. The pages ahead were blank, and for the first time in 33 years, I held the pen. Thank you so much for listening to Hannah's story. It is a heavy journey, but one that so many people navigate in silence. I would love to know, where are you listening from today? Please leave a comment below with your city or country, and let me know what you would have done if you were in Hannah's shoes. Would you have left the chair? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice. resilience, and reclaiming the narrative. Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every single one. Stay strong, and remember, never let anyone remove your seat at the table.